Great. So can everyone see a screen with the Greenham logo on?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So thanks very much for coming this evening. It's lovely to meet you. I'm always really excited to talk about Wikipedia. I am also quite new to the sort of the Greenham movement. When Vanessa sort of asked me about getting involved, I sort of said in a quite confessing tone, I think I only know about Greenham from Adrian Mole. That has now expanded and I know a bit more. But so it's really fun to be involved in a project like this. So who am I? So my name's Lucy. I'll be working as your sort of coach and guider while you learn to edit. This is a picture of me in Norfolk, looking quite windswept and maybe a little bit romantic. I love history, I love nature, I love cooking. I've been volunteering as an editor on Wikipedia for 3 years now. And I used to work as a care assistant and as a butcher. So there are lots of different skills. I know there's only a couple of us, but if there's something that you'd sort of similar that you'd like to share about your life, just to get people to know one another, that would be lovely. I don't expect anyone to have been editing Wikipedia, but favourite holiday places or favourite location to take a selfie. Mine is the salt marsh. Yeah, so yeah, pop something in the chat if you feel like it. Yeah, so while everyone gets to know one another, this is a project that's obviously run by Greenham Women, but I'm part of sort of the Wikimedia UK team of people who provide training, and we have a friendly space policy. So our goal is to encourage one another and to learn collectively. This means we have to think about what we do and are conscious and accountable for how the things that we do might impact other people. And we promise to respect one another, which I'm sure for the people coming to a session like this, everybody will. But I think it's always useful just to give ourselves a reminder. Greenham Common at sunset for a selfie. Yeah. Oh yeah, Cornish, Rebecca. I don't know Scotland at all, Lucinda. Like I think I've been to like Edinburgh once, so you'll have to. Yeah.
Edinburgh's lovely. I know the West Coast is very, very lovely.
Oh, have to give me some tips. So, press too many. So, what is Wikipedia? Which I think you might be thinking, oh, why start there? So I think one of the things that's amazing about Wikipedia is it's an encyclopedia. And what that means for us is it's the largest collection of free knowledge in human history. There's never been a place with as much knowledge as the websites that consist of Wikipedia. Every month, Wikipedia, and we're talking in particular about English Wikipedia tonight, but it's viewed more than 15 billion times. So there are people going to Wikipedia constantly. So it's I think it's the 6th most popular site in the world, and the others are social media sites. So, and Wikipedia is really unique in that it's a charitable organisation that's kind of outside sort of business parameters. So it really is quite amazing. And we all love facts, and we all love, weird and arcane knowledge, as well as things that are useful and essential as well. So it's really quite incredible. If I pop this in just in case people weren't familiar with what an encyclopedia was. So how encyclopedias used to be, you would take a room full of books and you would turn it into a shelf of books, or one book. With Wikipedia, it's something different. So we want to take the collective knowledge of humanity and have it in the palm of your hand, which we are doing, and we are doing it collectively and collaboratively, but there's still a way to go. So, and who reads it? So we know what it is, but who's actually consuming it? I went and spoke to some students yesterday, and all of them said, oh, I never use Wikipedia, I never go there. And I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. Very interesting. So I did a little search, and so I just Googled Greenham Women's Peace Camp. So obviously we've got our Wikipedia page at the top here, and Greenham Women everywhere below. But all the data on the left-hand side that people mostly ignore, I think, that's all aggregated from Wikipedia and its sister sites as well. And you'll see that for people, for places, for concepts. So if you've used a search engine, the search engine will be using Wikipedia to get its information and to bring its information to you. So I think essentially if you've used the internet, you've used Wikipedia, whether you knew it or not. And obviously kind of one of our goals is to think about bias. So even if you're not going to a Wikipedia site, what's on the Wikipedia site really matters because it's being pulled into these other places. So I also looked up Dawn Butler, and so again, we've got her website, her Wikipedia page, and we've got her column on the right-hand side. And again, that's being pulled through from Wikipedia. And she's a well-known MP, but for lots of other people who don't have as many kind of sort of things to list and to label about them, sometimes the data that comes through has its own bias in. So if you list someone's husband on there, that will be pulled through. If you list their children, that will be pulled through. And for women and their Wikipedia pages, that's much more likely to be listed on them. So you get this kind of sort of skew in knowledge. So a man's Wikipedia page is less likely to have his family and his wife on it than, yeah, I can see your face, Rebecca. One of my most satisfying things is to go and add much more important wives to men's Wikipedia pages. But it matters because if you Google someone and actually what you see is a list of their husband and their children, it reinforces some of those kind of labels that society gives us that we want to move away from. So the data that's available on Wikipedia is really important. And as I said, if you've used the internet, you will have used Google. But if you've used an Amazon Alexa or any other kind of device that's pulling its knowledge from the internet, it will be using Wikipedia as well. Anytime you say to, so my brother, some of his friends play the Ask Alexa game, where you ask something really obscure to Alexa and see if they get a reply. That information again is all coming from Wikipedia, and it's coming from a particular part of Wikipedia as well, which we'll talk about later. So it is really important that what we put on in the encyclopedia is representative, because it's the place that everyone is going to, whether they know they are or not. And there is also a gender issue as well with kind of some of the readership. So this was quite a small study that was just based in England, and it was talking about people who sort of went to Wikipedia as a hobby. And most of the people who were sort of going and reading there, like, I've got a break, I'm going to go and look on Wikipedia. Loads of them were young, and 70% were under 30 and 76% were men. So that's really interesting in that in this particular segment and at this particular point in time, the audience for what's on Wikipedia is yeah, very different to what it's not everybody, which I think is really interesting and kind of plays to the fact that we should have more content on Wikipedia available about women, because it's more likely that it's going to be a young man reading Wikipedia than it is a young woman. So I think that's really, yeah, a good thing.
Stunned about that. I'm on it all the time, like just all the time. I just assumed everyone was looking up stuff all the time.
Yeah,
I'm surprised it's so specifically young men.
Yeah, I think that was one specific study. I'm sure there are like a number of other variables, but for a kind of snapshot of a particular kind of usage, I think it's really sort of illustrative, oh, whatever the word is. And this again is a map of, this is just of English Wikipedia. So there are over 300 different language Wikipedias, which is amazing. I only work on the English Wikipedia, and this is where English Wikipedia is used around the world. Obviously, there are some people who don't have access to the internet, who aren't accessing Wikipedia, but in every country in the world, Wikipedia is being accessed. In some countries, Wikipedia has been banned. So Wikipedia is currently banned in China. It was banned in Turkey for a while. And I think that goes back to the idea of sort of how threatening access to knowledge can be for totalitarian governments. There was a recent piece in the news about Putin threatening to block Russian Wikipedia, so there is a sort of a serious political side to editing as well, and the risk that Chinese editors in particular, the personal risk that they go to edit is quite large. So there's a serious side, obviously, as well. So Wikipedia is this amazing endeavour that humanity's undertaken. It's used incredibly widely around the world, but how is it made? So it's made through collaboration and collective work. It was begun in 2001 with the idea that the more people you have creating knowledge, the more knowledge you will create. And it is entirely pretty much volunteer authored, volunteer created. There's a very small number of staff that run the Wikimedia Foundation, which kind of oversees the work. But 99.9% of people who are creating articles and adding knowledge are doing it in their evenings and in their weekends and on their commutes on the bus, because, well, of lots of reasons. So it is also unique in that people are generous with their time and with their knowledge and with their access to resources. So what I thought we'd do quickly, or not quickly, is just bear with me 2 seconds. Can you see the screen? Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a device that helps you listen to Wikipedia. So each ping is a edit being made. So I find it really mesmerizing, but I will pause it now.
That's
I think
amazing,
isn't it? So each of your circles is someone adding something to Wikipedia, and your strings is someone signing up to volunteer to edit. And I think it's just a really nice way of sort of, being able to visualize the contributions, and you can see what people are working on. So there were quite a few sports and quite a few Korean articles that were being added to, which I think it's really lovely, and you can, if you are not that I've ever, well, I have done this, sometimes I'll be editing and I'll be making changes and I'll have that on and I'll see my changes come up, and it's just quite a nice way of just seeing what you're doing is
that's
really
cool.
nice. But all of them are different people, different individuals, and I find a lot of beauty in that. So why is it important to kind of edit Wikipedia? So we've talked a little bit about sort of who's reading it, something about who's producing it. So Wikipedia is created by volunteers, but there's a huge gender bias in who the volunteers are who are creating content. On English Wikipedia, it's about 80% of editors are men. And it was much higher. 3 years ago, it was about 90%. So a lot of women have got involved, and a lot of people women are working. But because of this sort of 17-year backlog of it being a very male focused volunteer program, there is a huge amount of bias in what has been produced and what is recorded on Wikipedia. And women have been one of the casualties of the fact that people will edit about what they're interested in, and men are not that interested in women. Some are, but there are more articles on English Wikipedia about footballers than there are about women, which is yeah, we checked it recently, some other editors and I, and we were like, this is not good. And then we had a big discussion and we were like, well, should we go around and delete a lot of footballers? But is that really, I don't, will that just create more grief and labour for us? So we decided not to do that. So it's really important to do work to kind of correct this bias. Like you were saying at the beginning, Lucinda, you know, there's a dearth of information about women in lots of areas on Wikipedia. The good news is that the needle is moving. So in 2015, a kind of volunteer project within the general volunteering that is Wikipedia was set up called Wiki Women in Red, and that's editors of all genders who are focused on adding women and women who are trans, and also non-binary people as well, to Wikipedia. And now we've got to 19.16%, which doesn't feel like a lot, but you have to remember lots of people are still producing articles about men at the same time. So you have to like push extra hard to get the statistics to change, but it is happening, and it has like big kind of real life consequences. More women are better known. If you Google someone, the first thing that comes up is their Wikipedia page, which is an aggregation of all the different sources that's used. And there's lots of different stories that editors have of like, oh, I made a page for this woman, and then that helped journalists find her, and then that helped them to write an article about her, and then suddenly like her hometown was interested in her. So there's lots of different ways that the information can like spin and evolve once you have something on an encyclopedia. So it's a feminist endeavour really to edit, and I mostly work on creating biographies for women. That said, there are also biases. This is again for English Wikipedia. So this is a list of the countries with the lowest representation of women in their biographical kind of categories. So Qatar is the lowest, with 18 biographies about women. I think that has lifted a little bit since I made this slide, I'll be honest, but they're still the country with the kind of least information about its notable women on the encyclopedia. And sometimes people go, oh, but someone always has to be lowest. But you know, the ratio of 0.02 women to men is
doesn't have to be that low, does it?
no. Someone has to be
the
bottom,
does it? Like, if you don't have to race to the bottom, that's really an excuse.
Yeah, so it does. And you know, a lot of the countries that have this issue are very patriarchal countries, and I had an interesting discussion with an editor who works on Arabic Wikipedia, which I found quite interesting. So they're a woman, and they were saying, yes, we want women to be more present on Arabic Wikipedia. So this is in contrast to English Wikipedia, but they were saying that some women are, because of the cultural norms, very uncomfortable with it. So they have kind of more sort of, there are women themselves who don't really want that kind of presence on Wikipedia because of culture and society. So it is kind of a little bit complicated, but on English Wikipedia, we just need sources and then we can write about people. And yeah, but it does mean that when, for example, you Google women from Qatar, you'll only ever get 18 biographies, you know, which, you know, is less than like a classroom of children in school. And
Nice.
there's the whole country, you know, so there's some work to be done. Lots of editors on English Wikipedia like to work on people from English speaking countries because of working with particular sources, but I like a challenge, so I often work on people from the Arab world. Anyway, so it might seem a bit depressing, but there's hope, and hope comes from Wales. I know, exactly. So there's a Welsh
case.
yeah. So we're all Welsh now, but there's a Welsh language Wikipedia, which has been supported by the Welsh government, and they set out, when they created the Welsh language Wikipedia, to have gender parity in their biographical articles. So there's actually slightly more women in the Welsh Wikipedia than there are men. So I don't know whether we'd ever get there with English Wikipedia, but it's really good to see that as a goal in another language and something that's succeeded. So the question I hope people are thinking is, oh, I'm really interested, I'm really excited, but what do I actually do? How does this actually work, this kind of Wikipedia editing? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to a different screen. And can you see the Greenham Women's Peace Camp one? Yeah, brilliant. So editing Wikipedia, if you've used Microsoft Word or a word processing system similar, you can edit Wikipedia. It's not as complicated as people think or people say. It's based around your key button as an editor is this edit button, which I'll press now. And what that does is basically turn any article into a draft. So you'll see there's some little bits of sort of extra information that are, ignore them. But you have a series of tools here. So you have your different kinds of heading. You have bold and italic. You can link to things. You can, most importantly, add sources. Everything we add on Wikipedia needs to be referenced to a reliable source that's external to Wikipedia. You can add different lists. You can add images and various other functions there. You can add symbols, but really it's based on something very similar to Microsoft Word. So I hope that gives people a little bit of sort of confidence, thinking, oh, actually, I've done this before, I can do this. What I thought might be good would be to just do a couple of edits while we're here together. So this is the Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp page, and this is one of the pages that I think Vanessa would like for volunteers to help expand, because it does have, it's a nice page, it's well referenced, it's got lots of references, but even I, just doing a bit of sort of digging around, have found quite a lot more that I think should be included that isn't here. So just to get to the bit that I saw and to demonstrate a couple of things. So one of the things that I understand was really important about the sort of the material culture from the camp was the production of the songbook, the official songbook. So that strikes me as something that could perhaps do with its own Wikipedia page. So we're not going to start that this evening. That's a bigger job for the kind of weeks ahead. But what we can do is we can make it into a red link. And what that does is it creates sort of a link that isn't there yet, but it acts as a marker to other editors that this is something that's notable enough for a Wikipedia page. So all we did there was highlighted the words and pressed the link button. And then because everything you do on Wikipedia is recorded, so you can't delete Wikipedia. You can undo your changes, but you can't delete things. And that's amazing. Like, in terms of like having a repository for all human knowledge, Wikipedia is like the safest place. There's a number of different servers, there's that are backed up in different locations. So it really is amazing. So when you make a change, it's really good to leave a little note to show other editors what you've changed. So I'll just put added link. And you can see that that's red there. So making changes to the page itself is kind of one of the things that it's really important to do. But another thing is making links to the Greenham Common Wikipedia page in other Wikipedia pages. So, like Blue Peter, here's something I prepared earlier. So one of the things that Vanessa mentioned was how kind of making webs was really popular as one of the ways of protest at the camp. So what I thought I would do would be to see if Greenham's mentioned on the page for spider webs. So there's a popular culture section, which I think is where it would be. And if other people are skim reading, you can see that it's not there. So what we can do is, hang on. Thanks for being patient while I find all my different tabs. So I'll press edit again. So one of the kind of easy ways to move between edits is copy and pasting. When you publish something on Wikipedia, you're kind of putting it out under an open license. So it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the commons. So you're donating your intellectual property to Wikipedia, essentially, which I hope we would all be happy with. But this sentence here is really nice. So posters were used by the women at Greenham and often featured the symbol of a spider web. So what you can do is copy and paste all of that and then go to the spider web page, click edit, and then paste. So you can see it's put a reference, it's copied that reference over. So someone coming to the page about spider webs might not know what Greenham is. So we should add the title of the page, which, to be fair, I could have just typed. But, okay. And then what we'll do is we'll use that linking tool again to add the link to the Peace Camp. And then we'll publish that. Added link to Greenham Common. And now when someone says, oh, what are spider webs made from? And arrives at the page for spider webs and cobwebs, and you hope that they're very interested in all of the natural science, and you hope that they'll make it down to the popular culture section. And here we are, Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp. So you hope that you will get people then moving from the spiderwebs page to the Greenham page. And that's really important, particularly with information about women, that you want to have it embedded across Wikipedia. It's fantastic to create a biography or to create a page about an organisation or something, but if you just have like a page that's almost like a standalone entity that doesn't link anywhere, it will be quite hard for people to find it. And we've all been we've gone to find out about gravy, and we've ended up at the 34th president of the United States, and you want the things that you're passionate about to be part of that journey that people go to, as well as supporting more information to be more widely available online anyway. So I hope that gives people a little taste of kind of how easy it can be. In kind of subsequent sessions, I'll talk more about sourcing and about how to kind of do editing in more detail. But I hope that gives people a little bit of confidence that you can sort of go away and sort of, actually, I do have the IT skills for this, definitely. And then so there's a few different goals that we've touched on about the project. It comes back to this idea of sort of integrating more information about the Peace Camp into Wikipedia, working on existing pages, and to potentially create some new ones as well. So one of the things that Vanessa had mentioned that was new to me was about the different gates, and that really kind of struck me as, oh, actually, yeah, that would be really good to see how we can expand that content and maybe expand it separately as well. And I think one of the ideas is to focus on the environment of the camp rather than individual women involved, to keep that collectivity in mind. So there are lots of places that we could start work on. And then finally, I just thought I would finish with a kind of why do I love it, and why do I think other people should get involved. I love finding things out, and I think it's that joy of being sort of taken out of your everyday when you're reading about a spider's web, or about a 1950s pop star, or about a particular tree. I think the more that knowledge is available and is available for people to use freely, the more we can hopefully expand each other's horizons and find out cool stuff. So that's kind of everything that I had to share this evening. Has anyone got any questions? I'm really happy to talk things through, go back over anything.
I have a question. Do you have to create a profile to be an editor?
So you need to, so technically, no, you can edit anonymously, but the edits that you make anonymously without logging into Wikipedia will be linked to your IP address. And this is it's for kind of tracing and culpability. However, I would always encourage people to have a login, and that login doesn't have to be identifiable to you at all, because it helps other editors sort of see that you're serious. Most of the vandalism we get comes from independent IP addresses. So once you have a username that could be nothing to do, like totally separate from your life and untraceable, within Wikipedia, you will just be known by that. So you might be called, I don't know, pencil lip balm or something. Those are the things that are on my desk. But that's kind of how you'll be known, and you will only then be sort of judged by your actions. And it helps other editors trust you. You can put things on there like, I'm learning to edit. That helps other editors be more kind towards you. And I think it's a really good thing to do, and I would strongly encourage people to think about it. I edit under my initials and my name, mostly because nobody told me that I could do something different. But you can have any kind of username. It's not it doesn't have to be traceable at all. I know some quite sort of prominent people who have deliberate sort of pseudonyms and sort of keep their Wikipedia editing quite separate from their lives. Other people edit quite openly. It's just whatever you think that you would be comfortable doing.
And I had the other question I had, and you touched on it, was the aims of the Greenham Common Peace Camp, to what their goals were for the Wikipedia activity. But it sounds like what you're trying to do is edit pages and create new ones, and focus on the collectivity rather than individuals.
Yeah,
I think because Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp was, there were no leaders, as Greenham women would say, and there are some more prominent Greenham women out there, and some of whom, like Rebecca Johnson, for example, who set up ICANN and has the Nobel Peace Prize. She has her own page anyway because of all the other work that she's done. And initially we thought, oh yeah, we could get like as many Greenham women with their own pages as possible. But then we realized through speaking to Greenham women about what do you think about things, that is in itself creating a hierarchy, which just goes against completely what Greenham women think and how they worked. So we thought, yes, it's better. And Greenham women thought it's better to expand the information on it that they are all part of, so it kind of remains equal. Lots of other ways of finding out about it.
I think the thing I would say as well is, although the focus of this bit of project isn't necessarily biographical, all the kind of editing skills that you'll be learning would be like totally transferable. And one of the because biographical work is often what people kind of want to focus on later. We've got sort of two sessions planned coming up, and kind of in the sort of final session, I was going to do so where might you want to edit next? And within that, I'd introduce something about biographical writing, if that's what people were interested in pursuing. I started, my first edit was on sort of military history, and now it's like totally evolved. So sometimes you end up working in an area of Wikipedia that you don't expect as well. So yeah.
Could I ask Lucy, if you were creating a new page, whether that is a biography or on an object like spiders' webs or whatever, obviously it depends on the amount of information that there is, but on average, would you be able to say how long it would take you to create a new page on Wikipedia?
It depends. I'm going to give a really sort of prevaricatory answer, because it depends how much effort you want to put in as an individual to that page. So some people make very short pages that we call stubs, and they might not take very long at all. And then there are other editors who make pages, but they want to put in everything that they can find about that person, so it's kind of more sort of complete. Either is fine, both are great. What we say when you're thinking about starting a page is that you need to demonstrate that the subject of the page is notable in its own right, and that's through independent secondary sources. And you need to have, we say, about 3 of them. So you need to have whatever you're writing about written about explicitly in 3 separate places. That might be a broadsheet newspaper, it might be an academic book, it might be an academic article, and kind of so on. And yeah, and that's the sort of general benchmark. More is always better, but that would be that's sort of the minimum that we sort of say. And then it just depends how fast you are as a researcher and how fast you can type. So it just kind of depends. One of the things I've been doing is sort of gathering references to different things to do with Greenham, so that people who are starting research have a little bit of a head start, and we know the kind of things that might be good pages to start off with. So the Green Gate, I think, that would be one that has enough written about it in academic articles and places where it would be easy to demonstrate its notability. I'd be really confident in that. Similar with the songbook, definitely. I think with other topics might need to do a little bit more delving and diving. But what I would probably say is that you can create, find the bit of topic that you want to work on, create some text, and then together we can judge whether we think it would be best inserted within the existing page or hosted kind of separately on its own page. You don't have to do everything sort of, you can draft things and sort of sit on them a bit and then work out where things live. So that's quite a good way to do it. Yeah.
Are you happy to stop sharing your screen now, Lucy? Just so that I'm quite missing everyone's faces.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's my personal, I'm just like, I want to see everyone before they go, that sounded great to me. I followed it and I was very reassured by the cutting and pasting, and the fact it was a bit like Word. I was like, oh, that is probably the only tech I'm familiar with. So that was all very reassuring. Yeah, very, very interesting. And I keep thinking of women who I feel like should be here. So I'm going to do a bit of emailing and texting as well, because there are lots of women who do plenty of typing on their computers and posting on social media, so could perfectly well do this, and I know will be like me and raging about the absences on Wikipedia, and it's like, well, then let's do something about it. So, yeah,
definitely. I love the kind of I'm now like my brain's buzzing with what other, like with the Spiders webpage, what other pages can we put Greenham in?
I thought
that.
I loved that as well.
Yeah, and it's really is worth it. Like yeah, it's really good. And there's ways of sort of mapping and telling where things are already. But I was quite surprised it wasn't on the Spider web page. So
it is now.
I know, exactly. And it was so fast.
That was so pleasing when you did that. I was like, oh my God, no, it's just there.
You can go and show people now, and yeah. And if you're the kind of person that's quite sort of motivated by statistics and things, there are ways of seeing page views. There are ways of sort of saying, looking at where people have been, where traffic has been coming to the page. So in a few sort of months we can look and we can see whether adding it to the Spider web page has made much difference.
Yeah,
I hope it does, but might not. But there's lots of ways you can look at things like that.
The Greenham girl in me is really excited about finding as many military pages as we can, because there will be ways to link Greenham to all sorts of military and nuclear stuff.
Yeah,
that really pleases me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on a kind of like, if you're thinking about sort of editing as sort of a more longer term thing, editing on women's topics has like the strongest volunteer community kind of within Wikipedia's editing volunteers. So there's lots of peer support available. Existing editors are really, really keen to support people kind of beyond their sort of first edits. So it is a really great space within Wikipedia to where you'll get a lot more support than saying like, I don't know, Wiki Project Museums is another, but that's just lots of people who are interested in museums who just do things by themselves. There's much less of the kind of collective support. So
amazing. Thank you so much, Lucy. That's been an amazing little introduction. And yes, hopefully lit some sparks for the next couple of sessions.
yeah.
If people do have any questions before the next session, please do feel free to email me as well. I may be able to answer them, or I can pass them on to Lucy, or specific things that you're hoping that we'll focus on, or anything like that. And do pass the details on to other people as well. If you think, oh yeah, I now know that, like you were saying, Becca, I know other people who'd like it, please do put them in touch with us.
Yeah, we do, definitely.
Thanks very much. Thanks for indulging me. I love talking about Wikipedia. So, you know, great. Best way to spend a Thursday night.
Yeah.
Wednesday night. What night is it?
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday night.
Edging towards the weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Lucy, and really nice to meet everyone. And
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. We'll see you at the next session.
you soon.
Bye.